Oh my god. Oh, Jesus. That's a Bracken game. That was Freddy Fazbear. Oh my god, it's a worm game. You see that giant red dot? Hairbrush? Oh my god, please. There's a bell? I hear something. Oh my god, please. Have you ever tried Lethal Company by yourself? Because I can tell you it's terrifying and actually pretty difficult. That's why I challenged myself to complete every moon by myself. When I mean complete, I mean I must grab at least 3 items, escape with them, and sell them. Now, why is this challenge so difficult? First off, you have to pay for the later moons. This in a multiplayer run is not that hard. However, getting 1,850 credits by yourself without dying while reaching the quota is quite difficult. This can be even worse if you fail the moon and have to leave it, because even though it's free to go there once you are on the moon, if you leave a paid moon, you will have to pay for it again. This means that if you get an unlucky status condition on a moon, you might just need to risk the whole entire run and potentially have to deal with a status like Eclipsed on a map that is super dangerous. Luckily, we are able to cycle conditions, and it is very unlikely to get 3 conditions in a row, but these moons are also quite dangerous on the inside, so if you're unlucky, you can easily die or not be able to find 3 items to complete the moon by our rules. If this ever happens to us, we can basically say goodbye to reaching quota, and we'll need to play much more risky to complete later moons. Second, being by yourself means that if you die, the run is basically over. You can technically recover if you lose everything, but for this challenge it will be hardcore, so if I die I must restart even if I still have time to reach quota. To prove this point, let's look at what we are going against. Manticoil and roaming locusts are literally harmless, so let's ignore them. Circuit bees won't attack you unless you risk going for their beehive, and I actually get really happy when I see a spore lizard or slime because they are just so easy to deal with. Just don't get close to them. Next up are hoarding bugs and baboon hawks. I don't consider them super dangerous as they don't do much damage, but you can get killed by them, so be relatively careful, but don't be too scared of them. Heck, I even would say that bunker spiders and thumpers are pretty low threats compared to what you could be going against. Spiders can be outran and they do not one-shot, and that is basically the same with thumpers, although I consider thumpers more dangerous just because of how fast they are. However, spiders can screw you over if you do get caught in their web, so be careful. Every creature I just mentioned I do not care about going against. The common theme among them is that they do not one-shot me. When you are solo, getting one-shot is literally the end, so minimizing your risk of dying is the best case scenario. You can also count power points, which I won't get into yet, to figure out what creatures you are going against in the dungeon. If I figure out that a one-shot creature is not in the dungeon, I'm going to clean that place dry. However, if there is a one-shot creature, I might leave it early. The only one-shot creature I'm not scared of is the snare flea. The fleas can be killed by hitting them with a shovel, but more often than not, the way to kill them is by running out the door and killing them with sunlight. As a matter of fact, that is the only way to kill them in solo. This means that in solo, it is even more important to know where the exit is, just in case these headbugs get on you. Just remember, when you kill a creature, the power points come back, so something might replace it. Luckily, the fleas are only 1 power point, so it can easily come back as something weak like the slime. Also, apparently in solo, the fleas do not one-shot you and they actually leave you at critical health, but I did not get jumped by one, so I do not know if that's true. Maybe I'll test it later. Surprisingly, the creature I have actually seen the least is the coil heads. They are basically weeping angels, but if you don't know what is behind you, you might get screwed. Without someone there to guide you, you could easily walk off a cliff or into a sentry or a bracken.
We have to keep looking at.
Corey.
We don't have to look anymore, chat.
So this means you should always remember where the exit gate is, just in case you get stuck by a coil head. If you can trap them behind a door though, that'd be even better because you can keep looting. I would say the exact same thing about a bracken also. Theoretically, brackens are actually not that dangerous. You just have to look at them and make sure not to stare at them. But as we saw in the beginning clip, that bracken was charging at me, and if I didn't look there, I was insta-dead. That is why if I see a bracken, I book it. They are so fast that they seem to teleport, and if you get unlucky, they just kill you and end your run. They are also, in my opinion, the scariest thing in this game. Without multiplayer, your chance of getting jumped by a bracken is so high that I just recommend leaving. Also, you might have noticed that my bracken looks a lot like Freddy Fazbear. This is because I'm using Dytolan's mod pack, so my scroll reel is fixed. If you don't know, the scroll reel actually goes in the opposite direction as it should, so the mod pack fixes that. However, he added the Freddy Fazbear mod without telling me, so thank him for that, I guess. The only other mod in the pack is the More Suits mod. That just adds customization, and I have my own custom suit in there. Not like it really matters because we can't see it. So there's absolutely no gameplay changes. To finish up the dangers of going solo, gestures you should pretty much treat the same as a multiplayer. Just grab as much as you can and leave before it finishes winding or right as it finishes. It is faster than you and it perfectly tracks you, so don't play around with it. The final indoor creature is the Ghost Girl, which is so much more dangerous in solo. It is true that snare fleas get much more dangerous since you can't hit them off, but the Ghost Girl normally only targets one person, and in solo, that has to be you. Therefore, rather than someone distracting her, you kind of just have to treat her like a jester. I would even say she is more dangerous because apparently she can go outside. This means that if she starts chasing you, you better be close to the ship. I don't know how fast she travels since I haven't really played with her much, but I know that you must sprint, which can be a problem outside. The reason I say that is because of the eyeless dog. The best way to counter them is by crouching past them outside, which works great until you need to sprint away from something like an Earth Leviathan or Forest Keeper or Ghost Girl like I said. Earth Leviathans are giant worms that you just need to dodge when they attack, while Forest Keepers simply run at you when they see you. My strategy to counter the outside creatures is simply to get back to the ship before they even spawn, which is something you might have noticed. In this challenge, I have the leisure to be able to have some terrible runs. In the future, I plan on making these challenges harder, so I cannot do that, but I wanted to learn the game a bit more before doing that. I also believe that having a flashlight makes the game look much better. I don't think most people want to see me in the complete dark spamming right click, so that is why I will not be buying any items besides the flashlight. And the third and final reason why going solo is so difficult is just being scared of the game. As I said earlier, something like a Bracken is very scary and really jump scares you. So it is very hard for most people to play this game solo. Even I had a very hard time doing this. So if you're interested in playing solo, I recommend occasionally playing with friends on this game, and then going and playing solo, and then when you kind of get tired or kind of get scared of the game, go back to playing with friends, and then just kind of go back and forth until you're comfortable with it. Anyways, I think the best way to explain my strategy for this solo challenge is to start with the first day. On day 1, I decided to go in order and started with experimentation. Experimentation is unique since you can actually predict what will be in the dungeon by counting power points. Since experimentation can only have 4 power points, you can use this chart to deduce what is in there. For example, if there is a bunker spider, that is 3 power points and therefore a Bracken cannot spawn, since there is only 1 power point left and a Bracken is 3 power points. Hopefully that made sense. This makes it really easy to decide if I should stay inside or if I should just get out of there. This trick doesn't work well outside of experimentation, but it's a mechanic that I find super interesting and I wish we had more of. Anyways, when I landed, I grabbed the pro flashlight I ordered earlier and went inside the main door. The power seemed to be off, so I am very glad I made the flashlight rule, or else I'd be relying on scanning everything, which would not be super visually pleasing. And I should mention that my brightness is turned up so I can still see, but oh man does the game look much better with a pro flashlight. I also found the power cord, which is good, but kinda sucks that I found it this early as I would rather turn on the lights, but it's good to know it's here. Another thing is that since the lights are off and the pro flashlight battery is so long, I can just keep it on the entire time and not run out of battery, since I will be leaving the dungeons early to guarantee I don't die. I found the V-type engine as my first item, and then later I found one of the big rooms and found a jar of pickles in a cabinet. This means that I know where 3 items are, and I grabbed the apparatus as I left. Thing is, I think... oh, my dogs are barking. I'm sorry if you can hear that. At the time, I didn't really consider money being the real issue of completing this challenge, so I should have explored more and tried to get every item since it was the first moon I've been to, but I didn't, so I'll have to make up for it later. However, that is the first moon completed. I won't be going into detail on every moon, but only on the new ones and the ones that were actually interesting. Speaking of interesting, day 2 I went to Assurance, and this is my favorite moon. It has the smallest chance of Brackens, and the loot for solos are pretty good considering how low risk it is. Snare fleas are a huge issue, but apparently in solo they don't completely kill you for some reason. I didn't know that until now, but it makes Assurance even better. Right off the bat, I get a V-type engine and a big room, meaning that I can check the cabinets for holy crap. Holy crap! Look how much stuff there is! You do not know the excitement I got getting 5 items immediately. This map is already one of the best for solo, but it has an average scrap of over 600, which means I can normally get 2 trips worth of items with relatively low risk. I will be visiting here a bunch. There was even a hidden pickle jar, and while leaving I saw this large axle. My luck on this second day was beyond impressive. I actually tried to explore more, but then I heard a spider. As I mentioned earlier, it is possible to count PowerPoints on Assurance, but then this happened. Okay, it's a spider round. That's actually good news. So if I see anything else... that's not a Bracken, that means it's not a Bracken round. Okay, I think we should leave because that spider is so close. Oh my god. Keep in mind, you can still take a hit from a spider, so feel free to land on him. Yeah, that was kind of close. Obviously, since it can't one-shot me, I am relatively safe. But if I were to step into one of its webs, I will just straight up be killed. It isn't worth trying to run in there with low health, so I just took 2 trips back to the ship with all our items. And I'm glad I did. Or else I'd have to risk dodging this Earth Leviathan, which I don't particularly want to risk. On day 3, I decided to go to offense since Val was flooded. I was trying to complete the moons in order, but it really doesn't matter. Offense is quite a bit more dangerous as it is a tier 2 moon, however it has a very low chance of Brackens, which makes it much easier for us to not get one shot, if it wasn't for the Coilhead chances. Coilheads have a decent chance of spawning on offense, and since we are solo, we better know the way out. I immediately find a large axle and a plastic fish, so I got 2 out of my 3 items. But after a bit of exploring, I started to worry. I couldn't find any items and I would need to go deeper into the dungeon. As I mentioned earlier, I want to avoid doing that because I will probably get lost and potentially cornered by a Coilhead. However, I luckily checked all 3 directions, and even though one of them was a dead end and the other was a giant maze, the third way had some bottles, and with a little bit of greed, I also found a big bolt. Since I didn't want to risk going into that giant maze, I just decided to leave. That is very unfortunate as you can potentially get a lot of stuff from offense, but since I didn't know how to get to the fire exit, I just left. I have been told there's a way to get there without an extension ladder, but I don't know how to do that yet. On day 4, I went to the company to sell my items and meet quota. I was actually feeling pretty good about the amount of gear I had, and since I didn't want to miss quota later down the line, I decided to stockpile. This will be very handy later down the line, and I'm very glad that I didn't oversell to risk going to a tier 3 planet. If you forgot, tier 3 planets cost between $550 and $700, so it's not crazy to sell everything in order to go there, but since it's so risky and I'm only one person, it is statistically not a good idea for me to do this. On day 5, I went to March just to get it over with. I actually don't like March, and Assurance is just a safer, more profitable planet, so I will never come back here unless I need to. There are more fire exits, but it's not really worth it. At least in my opinion, I know some people differ. After some exploring, I found some bottles, a stop sign, and a metal sheet. Then I left without exploring anymore. Call me a pussy, but March is the death sentence in solo, and I don't feel like losing my round yet. March is completed though. I've just had some really bad experiences on it.
I'm scanning.
Oh, turret! Run, 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 run!
And let's go.
Not much happened on day 6 since I went back to experimentation and I got really unlucky with my loot. I checked both entrances and didn't get much, so I just left since I still didn't know what creatures spawned yet, and I would have had to go through a maze. On day 7, I finally was able to get a Val. Val unfortunately has a pretty decent chance of Brackens, so I don't want to be here. This was actually made even worse by the fact that I found 3 big items, which means I must take 3 trips back to the ship. I have a hard time getting around forest keepers, so I took the large items back early, but I can't just leave without exploring a bit more.
Tedjadotha first says hello YouTube.
We're using the classic 2010 YouTube algorithm. It's actually, you should say instead of subscribe, you should just comment. You know why? Because then I'll respond to it, maybe, in the comments, and therefore you'll go back to the video and watch it again, and then subscribe. And you help my algorithm. Dido posted, I think, 5 Lethal Company clips, and I commented on one of them, and that's the one with the most views. So I truly believe that commenting helps. Now, last time I was here, a freaking Freddy Fazbear. Okay, we're not dealing with it. I'm pretty sure I heard a Bracken's footsteps, so I decided it was best to leave before getting some more Vietnam flashbacks. On day 8, it was back to the company to sell some stuff. This was actually when I started to get worried. If I was playing this passively, am I going to get enough money to visit all tier 3 moons? I decided to just meet quota and grind out some more money for now, so on day 9, I went back to Assurance to test my luck again. I managed to get 5 more items with barely any effort. The only reason I didn't keep exploring was because of the turrets in my way. I just didn't feel like risking it since I still had time to play it safe. After an amazing day 9, day 10 was forced between experimentation and March, and you know I'm not going to March, so we had a very boring day 10 on experimentation. Okay, I'm being real careful of please. Oh, sweet. Hey, key. We've actually been, we needed one of these earlier. Okay, we're not going down there because that's just not worth our time. I have a bad feeling about this run. I don't know why. Is that really worth it? Let's not risk it. Let's just go. Wow, we did terrible. Honestly, I probably should have went to March anyways. On day 11, my 2 safe places were rainy, so I decided to go to Vow and ended up getting a little bit of a wake-up call. Alright, let's let my anxiety go up. Decent start. Let me check behind me just in case of a Bracken. It's not worth going down these hallways, quite simply. Not when I'm just playing for money. Or no, that's a bell. Alright, I think it's time to go to the fire exit. Oh, Jesus. That's a Bracken game. That was Freddy Fazbear. Alright. Last time I played on Vow and had a Bracken, it instantly teleported to the fire exit.
Yesterday.
Oh! Oh, that's... Oh, leave! It is not worth it risking my life on something that can insta-kill me, and that scares the crap out of me. Day 12 is selling day, so let's skip to day 13 with our new quota of 502. I still feel pretty safe with our quota, so we're going to keep playing cautiously, especially after a Bracken was charging at me. A couple seconds later and that Bracken would have killed me, and that is why I leave instantly whenever I see one. However, we actually have enough money to go to a tier 3 moon. I decided to get Titan done because it's my favorite of the 3 tier 3 moons. Normally I have 3 cannon fodders to help me grab a bunch of loot, but this time I'm all alone. When I get inside, I find an old phone. This isn't great because it makes noise and attracts eyeless dogs to your location. However, my locker luck continues with a golden cup, painting, and bell. This means that as long as I get out with the items, I've completed my first tier 3 moon of the run. Which is exactly what I do. After 2 trips, I get all 4 items out, and I'm really disappointed with myself for not staying longer and getting a lot more loot. But at the time of playing, at 10 AM, my friend Kobe got killed by a coil head when he entered one day, so I did not want to risk that fate happening to me, so once it was past noon, I just left to avoid any risky creatures spawning. On day 14, I was going to risk going back to Titan, but since I don't want to get hit by lightning, I went to my boy Assurance, who finally let me down. I explored that thing as best as I could, but there was only one way to go, and I heard what I thought was a thumper in there. At that time, I also didn't know that you could stand on a railing and hit the thumper with a stop sign, which I found earlier and still had. So it pains me to say that I actually left with nothing new. This is when I started to panic a little bit. I really do think that the close call with Freddy Fazbear was the reason I was shaking up, because I was definitely not playing as confidently as I was earlier. However, because I played decently well in the early game, I had leeway to play like this in the mid game. Remember, we're not trying to get as far as we can, we're just trying to get 3 items from every moon. I actually went back to Assurance on day 15 because it's still my favorite, and this is how it went. I seriously think my run-in with the Bracken is making me play worse. Okay, that's good. Okay. Unfortunately, just like day 14, I heard another thumper down a hallway, and that was the only way to go. I also know that I can buy an extension ladder, but I was saving up money and I didn't really think it was going to be helpful. In hindsight, that ladder would have probably bought itself back and more, since I lost out on a lot of resources by not having a ladder. I think by now you guys have caught on that every 4 days we go to the company building, so after doing exactly that, it was day 17. Unfortunately, when I was selling our stuff, I realized I did not have enough money to go to both Rend and Dine, so we must reach quota one more time. On day 17, I decided to go to Rend just to get it over with. With a high anxiety and a tree branch to the face, I ran through the snow to the building. I see a lamp. A key? I mean, a key counts, right? That's an item. I think a key counts. We just have to make 2 trips now. That's amazing, actually. We'll have to sell the key to make sure that it counts, but yeah. Again, in hindsight, I would have probably explored more. However, I've died to turrets and eyeless dogs on this map before, so I'm not risking it. Especially when I will probably have enough money already to survive this quota, as long as we get another $100. I should have mentioned that since the quota is around $700, Dine is $600, which means that we are guaranteed to get Dine now. Right now, it's all about surviving until then, and also getting a little bit more money. On day 18, for content reasons, I went back to Rend, and I chickened out after grabbing only 1 item. This is why I said in the future I will probably make this harder, because I don't need to risk my life right now. since I just have enough money. And at the time I understood that, so I just booked it. And can you guess what I did on day 19? I landed, then took off. We are going to complete this challenge as soon as possible. For day 20, I sold everything but a stop sign and the keys. This now gives us enough money to go to Dine and complete the final moon. I did accidentally forget to sell the keys from Rend, so we will need to do that when we sell our stuff for Dine. Because on day 21, Dine was flooded, so I decided to cycle the moon to remove the status condition. It is very unlikely that a moon is going to have a condition 2 times in a row, so that means finally on day 22, we set course for Dine. Dine is my least visited moon of them all, so this will be tense. Right now, all I can think about is how wrong this could go. Whether a turret shoots me around the corner, a Bracken grabbing me from behind, or even a ghost girl following me outside and leading me to an eyeless dog. I must be quick, efficient, and quite honestly, take some risks bolting through the dungeon to guarantee I get 3 items. If we're unlucky, the ghost girl will get us, or something will spawn. If we're lucky, nothing spawns, we get 3 items right at the door and we can just leave. Dude, I am not ready for this. The lights are all off. A landmine game. Okay. Hairbrush. Oh my god, please. Where are 3 items? Please. Please, where are 3 items? All I need. There's a bell. Okay. And 1 more item, please. Please? Oh my god. Please. I hear something. Okay, there. Okay, I can leave now. Just gotta make sure that there's nothing. Okay, if there's a ghost girl this round, it would be right there. I thought I stepped on a landmine. Yes, okay! We just gotta make sure an eyeless dog doesn't get me. Dude, I heard something. I heard something. I'm shaking so bad. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet because I'm gonna try hard this. I don't want to lose this run. I'm gonna try hard and be quiet just in case of an eyeless dog. Please. I know it's gonna have a hard time getting me from the side, but I've literally died right here before. At like 2 p.m. before. I'm just gonna risk it. I can't be overly aggressive though. I want half my sprint just in case. On the ship. Okay, no eyeless dog yet. We didn't have to deal with an eyeless dog. Please. Please. Yes. Oh my god. We did it. We did it. We did it. We completed every moon under our criteria at least. I don't know what other people would consider complete, but I consider 3 items from the place complete. For you guys, that looks super, super simple. But for me, I was having a freaking heart attack. That felt like I was there for 5 minutes, when in reality, I was only there for 1.5 minutes. After that, on day 23, I sold the 3 items and the key, and officially, I completed the challenge. In reality, this challenge is not that hard. However, the mental strain this game puts on you is terrifying. What a great game though. And if you want to see me do harder Lethal Company challenges, please like, subscribe, and as I said in the video, please comment as that helps me so much. And since I'm considered an Overwatch content creator, my videos get tanked by the algorithm when they're not Overwatch related. So if you enjoyed, feel free to help me out. I am actually thinking about doing a 100 days on this game. I just need 3 competent people to help me. So if you're competent, I guess you can join my Discord and help me out. I do have Daitolan who put the mod pack together that I use, so he'll probably join. So if we get 2 other people, I might try it out. Also, tell me if you like hearing the voiceovers or hearing the gameplay when I go inside the dungeons. I tried to do a mix of both in this video, and I'm not sure which one I like better. Anyways, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all later.